Ethan Wallace sipped his usual glass of aged scotch, the amber liquid glowing faintly in the warm light of his study. Outside, the Seattle skyline shimmered against the evening haze, a testament to the life he had built. Yet, despite the success and wealth, the silence of his mansion weighed heavily on him. The polished marble floors echoed his every step. The walls, adorned with priceless art, felt more like barriers than windows to beauty. The absence of Eleanor, his late wife, lingered in every corner. Her laughter, once the heartbeat of the house, had been replaced by an oppressive stillness. Christopher, their only son, had grown distant over the years. The chasm between them widened by misunderstandings and unspoken regrets. Unable to bear the emptiness, Ethan decided to take a walk through the garden, a routine that often gave him brief solace. Tonight, the crisp autumn air carried a hint of something unfamiliar, a faint sense of anticipation. As Ethan approached the estate's ornate gates, he noticed a figure huddled on the stone bench just outside. He paused, narrowing his eyes. In the dim glow of the streetlight, he saw a woman. Her head bowed, her arms protectively wrapped around a child nestled against her side. The child stirred, her small face peeking out from beneath a worn blanket. Ethan's heart tightened. He hesitated. What would Eleanor have done? The thought of his late wife steeled his resolve. He pushed open the gate and stepped outside. "Ma'am," he called softly, his deep voice cutting through the quiet. The woman startled, clutching her child tighter. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, standing and grabbing a battered backpack. "We didn't mean to bother you. We'll leave." "Wait," Ethan interrupted, raising a hand. "You don't have to go. Are you all right?" Her guarded eyes studied him, as if trying to gauge his intentions. She was young, perhaps late 30s, but the lines etched on her face spoke of hardship. The child, a girl of about 7, clung to her leg, her wide eyes filled with a mix of fear and curiosity. "We're fine," the woman replied. Though her voice trembled, Ethan gestured toward the house behind him. "You both look like you could use a warm meal and a safe place to rest." The woman hesitated, her instincts telling her to refuse, but the chill in the air and the sight of her daughter's shivering shoulders forced her to reconsider. "I don't want to impose," she said softly. "It's no imposition," Ethan replied firmly. "My name is Ethan Wallace, and you are?" "Rachel," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is Lily." Inside the mansion, Ethan introduced Rachel and Lily to Grace Monroe, his longtime housekeeper. Grace, a stout woman in her 60s, with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue, looked the pair up and down with thinly veiled suspicion. "Mr. Wallace, who are these guests?" she asked, her tone making her doubts clear. "Rachel and Lily will be staying with us tonight," Ethan said. "Could you prepare something warm for them?" Grace pressed her lips together but nodded. "Of course." Rachel's unease grew under Grace's scrutinizing gaze, but Ethan's gentle demeanor kept her from retreating. As they sat at the kitchen table, Lily devoured a bowl of hot soup, her tiny hands trembling with hunger. Rachel's eyes glistened as she watched her daughter eat. After ensuring Rachel and Lily were settled in one of the mansion's guest rooms, Ethan retreated to his study. Sitting in his favorite leather armchair, he stared into the flickering flames of the fireplace. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel entirely empty. Yet, questions lingered in his mind. Who was Rachel, and what had brought her and Lily to his gates? He knew one thing for certain. He had made the right choice. Helping them had awakened something within him, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. As the night deepened, Ethan resolved to learn more about Rachel and Lily's story. Little did he know, their journey together was just beginning. The morning sun streamed through the grand windows of Ethan Wallace's mansion, casting golden light across the polished wooden floors. Ethan sat at the breakfast table, his newspaper untouched. His attention was drawn instead to the soft sound of laughter drifting from the garden. Lily, wearing one of Grace's hastily altered aprons, was chasing butterflies across the grass. Her giggles echoed through the still air, bringing a rare smile to Ethan's face. The sight reminded him of Christopher when he was young, running through the same garden with Eleanor watching proudly. But Christopher was gone now, their relationship fractured by years of neglect and unspoken words. That regret weighed heavily on Ethan as he watched Lily. Could he make up for his mistakes in some small way by helping this family? Rachel stepped into the room, her movements hesitant. She wore a simple blouse and slacks that Grace had lent her. The exhaustion on her face from the previous night was still evident, but her guarded eyes seemed softer this morning. "Good morning," Ethan greeted, gesturing toward the table. "Please, sit." Rachel hesitated before taking the chair opposite him. She glanced at the spread of food, freshly baked croissants, eggs, and a pot of steaming coffee, and her expression shifted from caution to gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Wallace. I don't know how to repay your kindness." Ethan waved a hand dismissively. "Call me Ethan, and let's not talk about repayment just yet." Over coffee, Ethan gently probed into Rachel's story. Her responses were brief, her words carefully chosen. "I used to work as a social worker," she admitted, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "Helping others was my passion. But life, well, life doesn't always go the way you plan." "What happened?" Ethan asked, his voice low and encouraging. Rachel hesitated, her fingers tightening around the mug. "A series of bad choices," she said vaguely. "I lost my job. Things spiraled after that." Her tone made it clear that she didn't want to elaborate. Ethan didn't press, though her words left him with a deep sense of curiosity and concern. Later that day, Ethan stood on the driveway looking toward the garage at the edge of his property. It was more than just a garage. It was a small apartment, built years ago as a space for guests. Now, it sat unused, its windows gathering dust and ivy creeping up its walls. Ethan glanced at Rachel, who stood beside him with Lily holding her hand. "This space has been empty for years," he began. "It's a little dusty, but it's livable. If you're willing, I'd like to offer it to you and Lily. You'd have privacy and stability until you get back on your feet." Rachel's eyes widened in surprise. "Mr. Wallace, I don't know what to say. That's far too generous." "I believe in second chances, Rachel," Ethan said firmly. "And I have no use for this space. It would make me happy to see it put to good use." Rachel looked down at Lily, who was gazing at the garage with undisguised excitement. After a long pause, she nodded. "Okay. Thank you, Ethan. I'll do my best to make this work." As soon as Rachel and Lily went to explore their new home, Grace Monroe cornered Ethan in the kitchen. She crossed her arms, her expression a mix of disapproval and concern. "Mr. Wallace, I've known you long enough to know your heart's in the right place," she began. "But are you sure about this? You don't know these people. They could take advantage of you." Ethan sighed, pouring himself another cup of coffee. "Grace, I've spent too many years keeping the world at arm's length. Maybe it's time I stopped." Grace shook her head, but said nothing further. She had worked for Ethan long enough to know that once he made up his mind, there was no changing it. The following day, Ethan watched as Rachel and Lily began settling into the garage apartment. Lily ran through the rooms with wide-eyed wonder, her laughter filling the previously silent space. Rachel, though still cautious, began cleaning and rearranging furniture to make the space their own. Ethan had the garage apartment's handyman, Marcus, repair a broken window and repaint the walls a warm shade of cream. When Rachel insisted on doing some of the work herself, Ethan relented, impressed by her determination. By evening, the apartment looked transformed. Rachel had added a few personal touches, like hanging Lily's sketches on the walls and placing potted plants by the windows. It was far from perfect, but it was a home. That night, as Ethan sat alone in his study, he couldn't help but feel a sense of quiet satisfaction. The mansion no longer felt quite as empty. Rachel and Lily's presence had brought life back into the place in a way he hadn't realized he needed. Ethan picked up a pen and began writing in the journal he kept tucked away in his desk. It was something he hadn't done in years, not since Eleanor passed. He wrote about Rachel and Lily, about the strange sense of purpose their arrival had given him. And for the first time in years, he wrote a letter to Christopher, though he wasn't sure if he'd ever send it. "Dear Christopher," he began, "there's so much I wish I'd said to you. So much I wish I'd done differently." He paused, the words sticking in his throat. Setting the pen down, Ethan leaned back in his chair and stared into the fire. Maybe it was too late to mend things with Christopher, but maybe helping Rachel and Lily could help him make peace with his own past. The morning sun filtered through the ivy-covered windows of the garage apartment as Rachel Myers unpacked the last of her belongings. The space was modest, but it had already begun to feel like home. Lily's laughter echoed through the apartment as she arranged her stuffed animals on the bed. Rachel stood in the small kitchen, wiping the counter and gazing out the window at Ethan's expansive garden. It was a stark contrast to the cramped shelters and dark alleys they had grown accustomed to. For the first time in years, Rachel felt the weight of survival lifting, just enough to let her breathe. "Mom!" Lily called excitedly from the living room. "Look at what I found." Rachel walked over to see Lily, holding up a wooden box filled with colored pencils and sketchbooks. They were old, but Lily's face lit up like she'd discovered a treasure. "Where did you find this?" Rachel asked, kneeling next to her daughter. "In the closet," Lily said, flipping through the pages of an empty sketchbook. "Can I draw, Mom?" Rachel nodded, smiling. "Of course, sweetheart. It's yours now." Later that afternoon, Ethan wandered into the garden, where Lily sat cross-legged on the grass, her sketchbook balanced on her knees. She glanced up at him shyly, then returned her focus to the page. "What are you working on?" Ethan asked, kneeling down beside her. Lily held up the sketch. It was a simple drawing of the garden, but the details were meticulous, each flower, leaf, and shadow captured with surprising precision. "This is amazing, Lily," Ethan said, genuinely impressed. "You've got quite a talent." Lily beamed. "Mom says I get it from her. She used to paint." Ethan's interest piqued. "Did she? I'd love to see her work sometime." Lily hesitated, her expression clouding slightly. "She doesn't paint anymore. She says it makes her sad." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe one day she'll feel ready again." The following day, Rachel and Lily joined Ethan for lunch on the veranda. Grace served the meal in stony silence, her disapproval of Rachel's presence still evident. But Ethan ignored her, engaging Lily in conversation about her favorite books and movies. As they ate, Harold Grayson, Ethan's closest neighbor, strolled into the garden. A wealthy developer with a penchant for gossip, Harold had been Ethan's acquaintance for years. "Ethan," Harold called, his tone friendly but with an undercurrent of curiosity. "I heard you've got some new tenants." Ethan stood, extending a hand. "Harold, this is Rachel Myers and her daughter, Lily. They're staying in the garage apartment for a while. Harold's smile faltered as he glanced at Rachel. Ah, I see. A charitable gesture? Rachel stiffened, her hands tightening around her napkin. Ethan, sensing her discomfort, placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. They're my guests, Harold, Ethan said firmly. And I'd appreciate it if you respected their privacy. Harold chuckled, raising his hands defensively. Of course, of course. Just looking out for you, old friend. As Harold walked away, Rachel turned to Ethan, her voice low. I'm sorry if we're causing problems. You're not causing problems, Ethan replied gently. Some people just have too much time on their hands. That evening, Ethan stopped by the garage apartment to drop off some groceries. He found Lily sitting at the small dining table, her sketchbook open and pencils scattered around her. Can I see? Ethan asked, gesturing toward the sketchbook. Lily hesitated but nodded. Ethan flipped through the pages, marveling at the intricate drawings of the garden, the apartment, and even Grace scowling in the kitchen. These are incredible, Ethan said, his admiration genuine. Have you ever thought about taking art classes? Lily's eyes lit up. Really? Do you think I could? Absolutely, Ethan said. I'll look into some options. Maybe we can find a local program. When Rachel entered the room, Ethan showed her Lily's sketches. Rachel's expression softened, pride mingling with sadness. She's always had a gift, Rachel said quietly. But we haven't exactly had the resources for lessons. Ethan met Rachel's gaze. Well, maybe it's time to change that. That night, Ethan sat in his study, writing another letter to Christopher. He hadn't sent the first one, but the act of writing had become a strange comfort. Dear Christopher, he wrote, today, I saw a little girl with more talent and joy in her drawings than I've seen in years. It reminded me of the time you built that model airplane for the science fair. Do you remember? I was so proud of you, but I didn't tell you. I should have. He paused, staring at the words on the page. For years he had carried the guilt of neglecting his family, burying himself in work instead of being present. Helping Rachel and Lily felt like a small step toward redemption. As Ethan closed his journal, he heard soft laughter coming from the garden. Peering out the window, he saw Rachel and Lily sitting under the stars, their silhouettes illuminated by the soft glow of a lantern. Lily was sketching again, while Rachel pointed out constellations in the sky. For the first time in years, Ethan felt a sense of hope. His mansion, once a hollow monument to success, now echoed with the sounds of life and laughter. And though he didn't know what challenges lay ahead, he was determined to see this journey through. The soft morning light spilled through the windows of the garage apartment, illuminating Rachel as she stood by the kitchen counter, lost in thought. The warmth of the small space clashed with the cold memories that had resurfaced overnight. She had dreamt of Trevor, the man who had shattered her world and left her life in ruins. Ethan arrived later that morning, carrying a bag of groceries. Thought you might need these, he said, setting them on the counter. Rachel forced a smile. You're too kind, Ethan. You've done more than enough. Kindness is free, he replied with a shrug. Besides, it's nice to feel useful for a change. His words struck a chord in Rachel. After a moment's hesitation, she gestured for him to sit. There's something I need to tell you, she began, her voice trembling. Ethan leaned forward, concern etched on his face. I'm listening. Rachel took a deep breath, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. Lily and I weren't always like this. There was a time when I had a good job, a home, a life. But then I met Trevor. She spoke slowly, as if pulling the words from the depths of her pain. Trevor had been charming at first, a charismatic man who seemed to care deeply about her and Lily. But once they moved in together, his true nature emerged. He drained her savings, manipulated her into quitting her job, and grew increasingly controlling. When she tried to leave, he became violent. "One night, I took Lily and ran," Rachel said, her voice cracking. "We had nowhere to go, but staying was no longer an option." Ethan listened in silence, his fists clenching at the thought of anyone hurting Rachel and Lily. "You did the right thing," he said softly. "Getting out was the bravest thing you could have done." Rachel's confession stirred something in Ethan. He stared at the floor for a long moment before speaking. "You're not the only one with regrets." Rachel glanced at him, her expression curious. "I failed my son," Ethan admitted. "Christopher, I was so consumed with my work, with building this empire, that I didn't see the cracks forming in our relationship." He felt neglected, and rightfully so. Ethan's voice grew heavier. "After Eleanor passed, I tried to reach out to him, but by then, the damage was done. We've barely spoken in years." Rachel placed a hand on his. "You still have time, Ethan. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that it's never too late to try." That evening, after putting Lily to bed, Rachel stepped outside for some air. The garden was quiet, the scent of blooming flowers filling the cool night. She wandered toward the gate, drawn by a strange sense of unease. There, tucked under a stone near the gate, she found an envelope. Her heart pounded as she opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper with a chilling message scrawled in bold letters: "You can't run forever." Rachel's hands trembled as she clutched the note. Trevor had found her. The safety she had started to feel was crumbling beneath her feet. The next morning, Rachel sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the note. Grace Monroe entered the room, her ever-watchful eyes narrowing at Rachel's pale face. "Something wrong?" Grace asked, her tone sharp but not unkind. Rachel hesitated, then shook her head. "Just a lot on my mind." Grace frowned. "Look, I've seen my share of sob stories. I've also seen people take advantage of good-hearted folks like Ethan. If you're hiding something, now's the time to come clean." Rachel's temper flared. "I'm not here to take advantage of anyone. I'm just trying to keep my daughter safe." Grace crossed her arms, unmoved. "Then you should tell Ethan whatever it is that's got you so rattled. He deserves to know." Their tense exchange ended when Lily came bounding into the room, breaking the silence with her cheerful chatter. Rachel plastered on a smile, but the weight of Grace's words lingered. Later that day, Rachel finally showed Ethan the note. His face darkened as he read the ominous message. "Trevor," he said, his tone flat. Rachel nodded, her eyes filled with fear. "I don't know how he found us, but I can't let him hurt Lily." Ethan stood, his posture resolute. "You're not going anywhere, Rachel. Not this time. You've been running long enough." Tears welled in Rachel's eyes. "But what if he comes here? What if he tries to hurt you or Grace?" Ethan placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Let me worry about that. You and Lily are safe here. I promise." For the first time in years, Rachel felt a glimmer of hope. Ethan's unwavering support was a lifeline she hadn't realized she needed. That evening, as Ethan sat in his study, he made a call to an old friend, a private investigator named Jack Callahan. Jack had helped Ethan with business security issues in the past and was someone Ethan trusted implicitly. "I need you to look into someone," Ethan said, his voice steady. "His name is Trevor Gaines. He's a threat to a family I'm helping, and I want to know everything there is to know about him." "Consider it done," Jack replied. "I'll start digging right away." As Ethan hung up the phone, He glanced toward the garage apartment, where Rachel and Lily's silhouettes were visible through the window. He didn't know what Trevor's next move would be, but he was prepared to fight for the safety of his new housemates. In his heart, he felt a sense of purpose, one that had eluded him for years. Protecting Rachel and Lily wasn't just an act of kindness, it was a chance to heal his own wounds. The morning sun painted the mansion and its gardens in soft hues as Rachel woke to the sound of Lily giggling in the garage apartment. She found her daughter in the corner, hunched over a sketch of Ethan's sprawling rose garden. Despite the tension from Trevor's resurfaced threat, moments like this gave Rachel a flicker of peace. Ethan knocked on the door shortly after breakfast, holding an old canvas under one arm and a box of paints in the other. "Good morning," he greeted with his usual warm smile. "I've got something to show you." Rachel frowned, confused, but followed Ethan as he led her to a side building she hadn't explored before. Inside, sunlight spilled through tall windows, illuminating a room filled with dust-covered easels, canvases, and brushes. The faint scent of turpentine lingered in the air. "This used to be Eleanor's studio," Ethan explained, his voice tinged with nostalgia. "She was an artist, much like you." Rachel's throat tightened. "Ethan, I appreciate this, but I'm not an artist anymore." "Why not?" Ethan asked, setting down the canvas. "You loved it once. It was a part of who you were." Rachel looked away, her hands trembling. "It's complicated. Painting reminds me of a time before. Everything fell apart." Ethan stepped closer, his tone gentle but firm. "Sometimes, reclaiming what we've lost is the best way to move forward. I'm not asking for a masterpiece. Just pick up a brush. See how it feels." That afternoon, Rachel sat before the blank canvas Ethan had set up. Her hands hovered over the paints, hesitation freezing her movements. Lily perched nearby, watching her mother with wide, expectant eyes. "Mom, you can do it," Lily encouraged, her voice full of innocent confidence. Rachel took a deep breath and dipped the brush into a soft blue. The first stroke felt foreign, but as the brush glided across the canvas, a familiar rhythm returned. Her tension began to melt away, replaced by a tentative sense of peace. By the time the sun set, a vibrant landscape of Ethan's garden had begun to take shape on the canvas. Rachel stared at it, her chest tightening with a mix of pride and vulnerability. She hadn't painted in years, but this felt like a first step toward rediscovering herself. The next day, Ethan invited Margaret Hayes, a local gallery owner and an old friend of Eleanor's, to the mansion. Margaret was in her early 60s, with an air of quiet authority and a keen eye for detail. "I hear you've been encouraging someone to paint again," Margaret said, shaking Ethan's hand before turning her attention to Rachel. "May I see your work?" Rachel hesitated, suddenly self-conscious, but Ethan stepped in. "She's only just started again," he said, leading Margaret to the studio. "But I think you'll agree. Her talent speaks for itself." Margaret studied Rachel's painting, her lips curving into a smile. "You've got an eye for color and composition," she said, her voice thoughtful. "There's something raw and emotional here. I'd love to see more." Rachel flushed, caught between gratitude and disbelief. "Thank you, but I'm not sure I'm ready to share my work like that." "Take your time," Margaret replied. "But when you are, let me know. I think the world would appreciate what you have to offer." As the days passed, Rachel spent more time in the studio. Each painting felt like peeling back layers of herself she had long buried. Yet, the fear of exposing her work to others lingered. One evening, as she cleaned her brushes, Ethan joined her in the studio. "You've been quiet lately," he observed. Rachel sighed, sitting down on a nearby stool. "Margaret's offer is generous, but it's terrifying. What if I'm not good enough? Ethan met her gaze. Rachel, you've survived things most people can't imagine. Painting is a part of you. It's not about being good enough. It's about telling your story. Just as Rachel began to feel a sense of normalcy, another letter arrived. This time, it was slipped under the studio door. The message was simple but chilling. I'm closer than you think. Rachel's heart raced as she clutched the letter. Ethan found her moments later, trembling and on the verge of tears. Another one? He asked, his jaw tightening. Rachel nodded, handing him the note. I can't keep putting you and Lily in danger. Maybe we should leave. Ethan shook his head firmly. You're not going anywhere. Jack's looking into Trevor, and until we know more, I'll make sure this place is secure. Rachel hesitated. Why are you doing all this for us, Ethan? You don't even know me. Ethan's expression softened. Because everyone deserves a second chance, Rachel. And because helping you helps me feel like I'm finally doing something right. That evening, Ethan called a meeting with Grace and Margaret. Despite her earlier reservations, Grace had grown protective of Rachel and Lily. We need to be vigilant, Ethan said, showing them the letter. Jack is investigating, but until we have answers, I don't want Rachel or Lily out of sight. Margaret nodded. I'll keep an eye out for anything suspicious at the gallery. If Trevor tries to contact Rachel's past connections, we'll know. Grace, though still wary, agreed to help. I'll do what I can to make sure they're safe. But we should be careful not to alarm Lily. As the household settled into a cautious routine, Rachel found herself leaning more on Ethan and the growing network of support around her. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that she wasn't alone in this fight. Late one night, as she stood in the studio, Rachel finished another painting, a vivid depiction of her and Lily, walking hand in hand through a storm, with a faint beam of light breaking through the clouds. Ethan entered quietly, his eyes widening as he took in the piece. Rachel, he said softly, that's extraordinary. Rachel smiled, tears welling in her eyes. It's not just mine, she said. It's ours. Ethan placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. And it's just the beginning. The rain fell steadily outside, creating a rhythmic patter against the mansion's windows. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Rachel sat at the kitchen table, staring at a third letter that had arrived earlier that morning. This one was far more explicit. You can't hide forever. I'm coming for what's mine. Her hands trembled as she clutched the note. Trevor was no longer just a distant shadow. He was closing in. Ethan entered the room, his expression darkening as he saw the letter. Another one? He asked, his voice low and steady. Rachel nodded, tears threatening to spill. I don't know how much longer I can do this, Ethan. I thought I could stay strong, but I'm terrified. Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We'll figure this out. Jack's working on it, and until we have answers, I'll make sure you and Lily are safe. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit motel on the outskirts of Seattle, Trevor stood by the window, looking out at the rain-soaked streets. He pulled out a crumpled photo of Rachel and Lily, his face twisted in a mix of anger and determination. She thinks she can run forever, he muttered to himself. His phone buzzed, and he answered it gruffly. The voice on the other end belonged to a man Trevor had hired to dig into Rachel's whereabouts. She's staying at some big-shot millionaire's estate, the man reported. The place is like a fortress, but I've got a lead on someone inside who might be willing to help. Trevor's lips curled into a cold smile. Good. Keep me updated. Back at the mansion, Ethan called a meeting in the living room. Rachel, Grace, and Margaret gathered around, the weight of the situation heavy in the air. I spoke with Jack, Ethan began. He's confirmed that Trevor is in Seattle. We don't know his exact location yet, but we have to assume he's watching. Grace crossed her arms, her usual stern demeanor softening. What do you need us to do, Ethan? For now, we stay vigilant, Ethan replied. Grace, you and Margaret keep an eye on the house and the gallery. Rachel, I want you and Lily to stick to the mansion and the grounds. No unnecessary trips into town. Margaret nodded. I've already warned my staff to be on the lookout for anything suspicious. If Trevor tries to approach the gallery, I'll know. Rachel, though grateful for their support, couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in her chest. I don't want to put any of you in danger, she said quietly. Ethan's voice was firm. You're not putting us in danger. We're a team now, Rachel, and we're not letting Trevor win. One afternoon, as Rachel worked in the studio, she noticed a figure lingering near the edge of the property. Her heart raced as she watched the man from the window. He wore a dark hoodie, and though she couldn't see his face, his posture felt eerily familiar. Without thinking, Rachel grabbed her phone and called Ethan. Within minutes, he arrived with Grace and one of the mansion's security guards. He was standing right there, Rachel said, pointing to the spot. I think it was Trevor. The guards searched the area but found no sign of the man. However, they discovered a cigarette butt and a faint footprint in the mud, confirming someone had been there. Ethan's expression hardened. I'll double the security detail, he said, and Jack will hear about this. That evening, Rachel found herself unable to sleep. She sat on the couch in the garage apartment, staring at an unfinished painting of Lily. The colors felt dull, lifeless, a reflection of her current state of mind. Ethan knocked softly on the door before letting himself in. I thought you might need some company, he said, holding a tray with 2 mugs of tea. Rachel managed a weak smile. You read my mind. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of their shared fears hanging between them. Finally, Rachel spoke. I'm so tired of being afraid, Ethan. I've been running for so long, and it feels like I'll never stop. Ethan leaned forward, his gaze steady. You've got every right to be afraid, Rachel, but you're not alone anymore. We're in this together. The next morning, Jack called Ethan with an update. Trevor's been asking questions around town, trying to find weak points in your security, Jack reported. He's dangerous, Ethan. You need to be ready. Ethan relayed the information to Rachel and the rest of the household. We can't take any chances, he said. Jack is bringing in an additional security team, and I want everyone to stay on high alert. As the household adjusted to the heightened precautions, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every shadow seemed darker, every sound louder. Lily, sensing her mother's unease, clung to her more than usual. In an effort to distract herself, Rachel threw herself into painting. Each brush stroke became a way to channel her fear and frustration. Margaret visited one afternoon and was struck by the raw emotion in Rachel's latest piece, a stormy seascape with a lone figure standing against the crashing waves. This is incredible, Rachel, Margaret said, her eyes glistening. You've turned your pain into something powerful. Rachel hesitated. Do you really think people would want to see this? Margaret placed a hand on her shoulder. Art isn't just about beauty. It's about truth. And this, she gestured to the painting, is truth. Late one night, as the mansion settled into silence, Ethan sat in his study, going over security plans with Jack on the phone. Suddenly, the motion sensor alarms near the front gate went off. Ethan's heart raced as he ended the call and rushed to the security room. The cameras showed a car idling just outside the gate. A figure stepped out, his face obscured by the shadows. It was Trevor. Ethan's jaw tightened. Jack, He said into his phone, his voice steady but cold. "He's here." As Jack mobilized the security team, Ethan stared at the screen, determination etched on his face. He wasn't going to let Trevor destroy the sanctuary he had built for Rachel and Lily. The following day dawned gray and overcast, mirroring the tension in the air. Rachel's nerves were stretched thin, and every small noise made her jump. Ethan had instructed the security team to patrol the grounds regularly, but the looming threat of Trevor made it hard to find peace. By mid-afternoon, the calm shattered. Rachel was walking with Lily near the garden, her eyes scanning the horizon anxiously, when a sharp voice called out from behind her. "Rachel!" She froze, clutching Lily's hand tightly. Slowly she turned, and there he was. Trevor stood just outside the garden gate, his tall frame casting a shadow over the neatly trimmed hedges. His eyes burned with a menacing intensity. "Trevor," Rachel managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't look so surprised," Trevor sneered, stepping closer. "Did you really think you could hide forever?" Lily clung to Rachel's side, her face buried against her mother's arm. "Mom, who is he?" she whispered. "Go inside, Lily," Rachel said, keeping her voice steady despite the terror gripping her chest. "Go find Ethan." "No," Trevor said sharply. "She stays." Ethan, alerted by the security team, arrived moments later, striding toward the garden with 2 guards in tow. His voice was calm but firm. "You're trespassing. Leave now, or I'll have you removed." Trevor's gaze shifted to Ethan, his expression twisting into mockery. "Ah, the knight in shining armor. Tell me, old man, what do you think you're protecting? She's nothing but a liar and a thief." Rachel's voice cracked as she shouted, "That's enough." The security guards moved closer, their presence adding weight to Ethan's warning. Trevor raised his hands in a show of mock surrender, but his smirk didn't waver. "Relax. I'm not here to hurt anyone. Yet." "You've said your piece," Ethan said coldly. "Now leave." Trevor's smirk faded. "This isn't over, Rachel. You owe me, and I'm not leaving without what's mine." Rachel stepped forward, her fear giving way to anger. "I don't owe you anything, Trevor. You took everything from me. My money, my career, my peace. You're not taking any more." For a moment, Trevor looked stunned. Then his face darkened, and he jabbed a finger toward Lily. "If you don't pay up, I'll make sure everyone knows the truth about you. And I'll start with her." Ethan's patience snapped. "Get him out of here," he ordered the guards. The guards moved in, and Trevor, sensing the shift, backed away. "You haven't seen the last of me," he spat before disappearing through the gate. As soon as Trevor was gone, Rachel sank onto a garden bench, trembling. Lily climbed into her lap, hugging her tightly. "Mom, who was that man? Why was he so mean?" Rachel stroked Lily's hair, her voice shaky. "He's someone from my past, sweetheart. But you don't need to worry. Ethan and I won't let him hurt you." Ethan sat beside her, his expression grim. "Rachel, we need to take this to the police. He's escalating." Rachel hesitated, tears welling in her eyes. "What if they don't believe me? Trevor has a way of twisting the truth." Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone in this. We'll make them believe you." That evening, after putting Lily to bed, Rachel paced the apartment, her mind racing. Ethan found her there, staring out the window into the darkened garden. "You're thinking about running again, aren't you?" he asked quietly. Rachel turned to him, guilt etched on her face. "It's the only way to keep Lily safe." Ethan stepped closer, his voice firm but gentle. "Running won't solve this, Rachel. Trevor will keep coming after you no matter where you go. The only way to stop him is to stand your ground." Tears spilled down Rachel's cheeks. "I'm so tired, Ethan. I've been fighting for so long, and I'm scared I'll lose." Ethan reached for her hands, his grip steady. "You're not alone anymore. You have me, Grace, Margaret, and Jack. We're not letting you fight this battle by yourself." In a dimly lit bar on the outskirts of the city, Trevor nursed a drink while making a call. "She's got people protecting her," he snarled into the phone. "But everyone has a price. Find me someone inside that house willing to talk." The man on the other end chuckled. "I've got just the guy. Give me a day." Trevor ended the call, his jaw tightening. "Enjoy your safety while it lasts, Rachel." The next morning, Ethan gathered Rachel, Grace, Margaret, and Jack in the study. He explained what had happened the day before and outlined a plan. "We need to fortify the mansion's security," Ethan said. "And we need legal action. Jack, can you file for a restraining order against Trevor?" Jack nodded. "I'll get started right away." Grace, though visibly shaken, spoke up. "I'll keep a close eye on Lily. If Trevor tries anything, he won't get near her." Margaret added, "I'll reach out to some contacts in the city. If Trevor's looking for help, we'll know." Rachel, though still fearful, felt a flicker of hope. She wasn't alone in this fight anymore. Amid the chaos, Rachel found solace in her painting. She began working on a new piece, a depiction of a stormy sea with a lighthouse standing strong against the waves. It was her way of channeling her fear and finding strength. Lily, too, became a source of light. Her laughter filled the garage apartment, and her innocent questions reminded Rachel of the importance of fighting for a brighter future. One afternoon, Rachel watched as Ethan helped Lily build a birdhouse in the garden. The sight warmed her heart and gave her a renewed sense of determination. Late one night, as Rachel worked on her stormy seascape, a knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find Ethan, his expression serious. "Jack just called," he said. "Trevor's been trying to bribe someone on the inside." Rachel's stomach dropped. "Who?" Ethan shook his head. "We don't know yet, but we're tightening security, and I've instructed everyone to stay vigilant." Rachel clenched her fists, anger replacing her fear. "Let him come. I'm done running." Ethan smiled, a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "That's the spirit. We'll face him together." As Rachel closed the door and returned to her painting, she added a beam of light breaking through the storm clouds. It wasn't just art. It was a promise to herself and Lily that they would overcome whatever lay ahead. The sun rose on the mansion, its golden rays spilling across the sprawling gardens and illuminating the tense household. Despite the underlying threat of Trevor's presence, Ethan made it a point to keep mornings as cheerful as possible for Lily. He believed that every child deserved moments of carefree joy, no matter the circumstances. That morning, Ethan joined Lily and Rachel in the garden, where Lily had set up a small sketching station. Her tiny hands were busy capturing the intricate details of a blooming rose bush. Ethan leaned over, marveling at her skill. "You have quite the eye for detail," he said, his voice warm. "That rose looks even better on paper than in real life." Lily giggled, her cheeks flushing with pride. "Mom taught me how to see the little things," she said, glancing at Rachel with adoration. Rachel smiled, her expression softening. For a brief moment, the worries of Trevor and the dangers lurking outside felt far away. As the days passed, Lily's sketches began to capture more than just the beauty of the gardens. She started experimenting with different subjects, Ethan reading in his study, Grace arranging flowers in the dining room, and even a group of birds perched on the garden fence. Each piece carried a charm and depth far beyond her years. One afternoon, Margaret visited the mansion to discuss security updates with Ethan. When she passed by Lily's makeshift art corner, she stopped in her tracks. "Who drew these?" Margaret asked, holding up a sketch of Ethan and Rachel sitting by the fountain. "I did," Lily piped up, running over to her. Margaret's eyes widened in amazement. "Lily, these are incredible. You have a gift." Rachel joined them, her heart swelling with pride. "She's always loved drawing. It's her way of making sense of the world." Margaret smiled thoughtfully. "You know, there's an upcoming children's art contest at the community center. I think Lily's work would shine there." Rachel hesitated at the idea of entering Lily into the contest. The fear of exposing Lily to public attention, especially with Trevor still looming, made her wary. "I don't know, Margaret," Rachel said later, as they discussed it over tea. "What if Trevor finds out? What if he tries to use this against us?" Margaret placed a reassuring hand on Rachel's arm. "I understand your concerns, but this contest could be a way for Lily to experience something normal and uplifting. She deserves to feel proud of her talent." Ethan, overhearing the conversation, chimed in. "We'll make sure the event is safe. Jack can coordinate security. Besides," he added, smiling at Rachel, "Lily's talent deserves to be celebrated." After much deliberation, Rachel agreed. "All right," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and hope. "Let's do it." The following week was a whirlwind of preparation. Margaret helped Lily select her best sketches, while Ethan built a display frame to showcase her work. Grace even pitched in by sewing a simple but elegant dress for Lily to wear to the event. Lily's excitement was contagious. She spent hours perfecting her entries, her small hands moving with purpose and determination. Rachel, watching her daughter, felt a surge of gratitude for the support they had found in Ethan and the others. "You're going to do amazing, sweetheart," Rachel whispered one evening as she tucked Lily into bed. "Do you really think so, Mom?" Lily asked, her eyes wide with anticipation. Rachel nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I know so." The day of the contest arrived, and the community center buzzed with energy. Children and parents filled the hall, their laughter and chatter creating a lively atmosphere. Ethan, Rachel, Grace, and Margaret stayed close to Lily, offering encouragement as she set up her display. When the judges arrived, Lily's sketches immediately caught their attention. One judge, a local artist, leaned in close to study a sketch of the mansion's garden at sunrise. "This is remarkable," he murmured. "The depth, the detail. It's extraordinary for someone so young." As the event unfolded, Rachel kept a watchful eye on the crowd, her nerves on edge. Despite Ethan's reassurances, she couldn't shake the feeling that Trevor might show up. When the winners were announced, Lily's name was called for first place. The room erupted in applause as Lily ran to the stage, her face glowing with happiness. Rachel's heart swelled with pride as she watched her daughter accept the award. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to believe that brighter days lay ahead. After the ceremony, reporters approached Lily to ask about her art. Rachel, initially hesitant, stepped in to guide the conversation. Ethan stood nearby, ensuring that no one overstepped their boundaries. "What inspires your drawings, Lily?" one reporter asked. Lily beamed. "My mom and Mr. Ethan. They help me see the beauty in everything." Rachel felt tears sting her eyes. Lily's words were a reminder of how far they had come and how much they still had to fight for. As the group prepared to leave the community center, Rachel's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Her blood ran cold as she read the message. "I saw you. You can't hide forever." Ethan noticed her pale expression and immediately stepped closer. "What's wrong?" Rachel showed him the message, her hands trembling. Ethan's jaw tightened. Jack needs to see this. We'll get to the bottom of it. Grace, overhearing the exchange, placed a comforting hand on Rachel's shoulder. You did the right thing by coming here today. Don't let him take this moment from you. That evening, back at the mansion, Lily sat at her art station, sketching a new piece. Rachel watched from the doorway, marveling at how her daughter seemed to process the world through her art. What are you drawing, sweetheart? Rachel asked, stepping into the room. Lily turned the sketchpad around to reveal a drawing of their family, Rachel, Ethan, Grace, Margaret, and herself, standing together in the garden. It's us, Lily said with a shy smile, because we're stronger when we're together. Rachel knelt beside her, tears streaming down her cheeks. You're right, Lily. We are. As the household settled in for the night, Ethan sat in his study, reviewing security updates with Jack. We need to tighten things up, he said. Trevor's getting bolder. Jack nodded. I've got a few leads. We'll track him down. Meanwhile, Rachel tucked Lily into bed, kissing her forehead. You were amazing today, my love, she whispered. I'm so proud of you. Lily smiled sleepily. Good night, Mom. Good night, Mr. Ethan. Rachel turned to find Ethan standing in the doorway. Good night, Lily, he said warmly. As Rachel and Ethan walked down the hallway, Rachel glanced at him, her voice quiet but steady. Thank you for everything, Ethan. I don't know how we would have made it this far without you. Ethan placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. You're stronger than you realize, Rachel, but I'm glad I could help. The night outside was dark and still, but inside the mansion, a sense of hope and unity prevailed. Despite the challenges ahead, they were ready to face them together. The sun broke through the clouds, casting warm light across Ethan's expansive estate. The atmosphere in the mansion had begun to feel lighter, with Lily's recent success at the art contest lifting everyone's spirits. Rachel and Lily had found a rhythm in their new life, and Ethan enjoyed the comforting buzz of activity in a house that had long felt hollow. Ethan sipped his coffee on the veranda, glancing over at Rachel and Lily playing with their dog in the garden. A rare smile played on his lips, but beneath the surface of his calm demeanor lay unresolved guilt, a weight that hadn't been lifted for years. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of an approaching car. Ethan turned to see a sleek black sedan pulling into the driveway. His brow furrowed. He wasn't expecting anyone. The car door opened, and a tall man in his early 40s stepped out. He had sharp features, neatly combed hair, and a tailored suit that exuded confidence, but his stiff posture betrayed a hint of hesitation. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. It had been over a decade since he'd seen his son, Christopher. Dad, Christopher said, his voice even but laced with tension. Christopher, Ethan stood, his surprise quickly morphing into a guarded expression. This is unexpected. Christopher approached, glancing briefly at Rachel and Lily in the garden, before turning back to Ethan. Can we talk? Ethan nodded slowly, leading his son into the study. As they entered, Ethan closed the door, bracing himself for the conversation. Christopher paced the room, his hands in his pockets. I've been hearing things, he began, his tone clipped. About you bringing strangers into the house. Ethan's jaw tightened. Rachel and her daughter aren't strangers. They needed help. And what about me? Christopher shot back, his voice rising. Did I not need help? Where were you when I needed you, Dad? Ethan's shoulders sagged. The guilt he had carried for years now staring him in the face. I made mistakes, Christopher. I was too focused on my career, on building a legacy, and I failed you and your mother. I know that. Christopher's expression softened slightly, but his anger still simmered beneath the surface. "It's a little late for apologies." Ethan took a deep breath. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to make things right. You came here for a reason. Let's start there." As the tension in the study mounted, Rachel, who had seen Christopher's arrival from the garden, knocked on the door. Ethan opened it, his expression surprised but grateful. "Sorry to interrupt," Rachel said hesitantly, her eyes darting between the two men. "I thought I'd bring some coffee." Christopher's gaze lingered on Rachel, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "You must be the stranger I've been hearing about." Rachel offered a polite smile, setting the tray down on the table. "I'm Rachel Myers, and this is my daughter Lily. Ethan has been incredibly kind to us." Christopher raised an eyebrow, his skepticism evident. "Kindness isn't something I remember him being good at." "People change," Rachel said gently, glancing at Ethan. "Sometimes it takes hitting rock bottom to realize what really matters." Ethan gave her a grateful look, and for the first time since Christopher's arrival, the tension in the room eased slightly. Ethan convinced Christopher to stay for lunch, hoping to bridge the gap between them. The meal was a quiet affair, with Christopher observing Rachel and Lily's interactions with Ethan. Despite his guarded demeanor, it was clear that he was intrigued by the dynamic. "Lily," Christopher said at one point, breaking the silence, "your art contest win. It's been making waves. I saw your sketch of the mansion in the paper." Lily beamed. "Thank you. Mr. Ethan helped me get ready for it." Christopher's gaze flicked to Ethan, his expression unreadable. "He did he?" After lunch, Ethan and Christopher retreated to the library for a more candid conversation. Ethan opened up about his regrets, recounting his struggles after Eleanor's death and his realization of how much he had neglected his family. "I wasn't there when you needed me," Ethan admitted, his voice heavy with emotion. "And I can never undo that. But I want to be here now, for you, for Rachel and Lily. This house, it's finally starting to feel like a home again." Christopher looked at his father, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "You're trying to make up for the past." "Yes," Ethan said simply. "For the past, and for the future." Later that evening, Christopher sat with Rachel on the veranda, while Ethan played chess with Lily in the study. They spoke in hushed tones, sharing their respective stories. "I know what it's like to feel abandoned by someone you trusted," Rachel said, her voice tinged with vulnerability. "Ethan may not have been the father you needed back then, but I've seen how much he's trying now." Christopher studied her for a moment. "And what about you? Do you trust him?" Rachel smiled faintly. "With my life, and more importantly, with Lily's." Christopher nodded, the edges of his guarded demeanor softening. Maybe he really has changed. As the night deepened, Christopher stood by the window of his guest room, staring out at the moonlit gardens. His phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Frowning, he opened it to find a single line of text. "We both know your father isn't as noble as he pretends to be." Christopher's expression darkened. The shadows of Ethan's past were not so easily buried. The next morning, Ethan found Christopher in the garden, helping Lily with a new sketch. The sight brought a smile to Ethan's face, a glimmer of hope that their fractured relationship might heal. "Join us for breakfast," Ethan said, his tone inviting. Christopher looked up, hesitating for a moment before nodding. "All right." As they walked toward the mansion, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this reunion was just the beginning of a larger challenge. But for now, he focused on the small victories, savoring the fleeting moments of connection. The morning sun bathed the estate in a golden glow, casting long shadows across the well-manicured gardens. Inside the mansion, A sense of fragile peace lingered. Lily's laughter echoed through the halls as she chased the family dog. Her carefree joy, a stark contrast to the underlying tension that Rachel and Ethan carried. Christopher, still adjusting to his time back at the estate, found himself watching the scene with a mix of nostalgia and curiosity. Though the mansion hadn't changed much since his youth, the people within it had shifted dramatically, none more than his father. Ethan stood by the window of the library, his eyes following Christopher as he ventured into the garden to join Lily. There was a flicker of hope in Ethan's expression, but it was tempered by the weight of unspoken words and lingering regrets. Rachel sat at the kitchen table, sorting through the morning mail, when her hands froze over an envelope, with no return address. Her breath caught as she opened it, revealing a single sheet of paper. The message was short, but chilling. "You can't hide forever. I'll be coming to collect what's mine." Her hands trembled as she stared at the words. Trevor's threats were no longer subtle, and the implications sent a shiver down her spine. She quickly folded the letter and stuffed it into her pocket, her heart pounding. Ethan entered the kitchen moments later, his sharp eyes immediately noticing her pale complexion. "Rachel, are you all right?" She hesitated before nodding, forcing a smile. "It's nothing. Just some junk mail." Ethan didn't look convinced, but chose not to press the issue. "If there's anything you need to talk about, you know where to find me." Later that day, Rachel confided in Margaret about the letter. Margaret's face darkened as she read the threatening note. "This has gone on long enough," Margaret said firmly. "We need to involve the police." "No," Rachel replied, her voice trembling. "If Trevor finds out, he might escalate. I can't risk putting Lily in more danger." Margaret placed a comforting hand on Rachel's shoulder. "You're not alone in this. Ethan, Christopher, and I, we'll figure this out together. But we can't ignore the threat." Reluctantly, Rachel agreed to let Ethan and Jack review the letter, hoping they could devise a plan without drawing too much attention. Meanwhile, Christopher had started to piece together fragments of the household's tension. He noticed the guarded way Rachel spoke, the wary glances she cast toward the gates, and the way Ethan and Margaret whispered in hushed tones. Curiosity turned into concern when he stumbled upon the letter in Rachel's pocket. She had left her coat draped over a chair, and the envelope slipped out when Christopher moved it. The words chilled him to the core. He sought out Ethan immediately, his voice sharp with accusation. "What's going on here, Dad? And why didn't you tell me?" Ethan's voice hardened as he realized what Christopher had found. "It's complicated," he began. "Complicated?" Christopher's voice rose. "Someone is threatening Rachel and Lily, and you're keeping me in the dark." Ethan held his ground. "We're handling it. Well, Jack is looking into it, and we have security measures in place." Christopher shook his head, his frustration evident. "That's not enough. You should have told me. I'm part of this family whether you like it or not." That evening, as the household settled into an uneasy calm, the sound of tires crunching gravel shattered the quiet. A black SUV idled at the gates, its tinted windows obscuring the driver. Jack, who had been monitoring the security cameras, immediately alerted Ethan. "We've got company," he said grimly, pulling up the live feed. Ethan joined Jack in the security room, his jaw tightening as he watched the footage. The SUV remained stationary, its engine humming ominously. "Do you recognize the vehicle?" Jack shook his head. "No, but it's definitely suspicious. I'll send someone to check it out." Before Jack could make the call, the SUV peeled away, leaving a cloud of dust in its wake. Ethan's stomach churned with unease. The message was clear. Trevor was closing in. That night, Ethan gathered the household in the dining room to discuss the escalating threat. Rachel sat close to Lily, who clung to her sketchpad, sensing the tension, but not fully understanding it. Christopher leaned against the wall, his arms crossed, while Margaret and Grace exchanged worried glances. "We can't ignore this any longer," Ethan began, his voice steady but resolute. "Trevor is becoming bolder. We need to take steps to protect everyone here." Rachel's voice trembled as she spoke. "I don't want Lily to be scared. She's been through enough already." Christopher stepped forward, his expression firm. "Then, let's stop waiting for him to make the next move. We need to gather evidence, build a case, and make sure he can't hurt anyone again." Margaret nodded in agreement. "And we'll do it together. Trevor doesn't stand a chance against all of us." Ethan glanced around the room, his heart swelling with a mix of pride and gratitude. "Then, it's settled. We face this as a family." The next morning, Lily surprised everyone by presenting a new drawing. A bold, colorful depiction of the mansion surrounded by bright sunflowers. "It's for you, Mr. Ethan," she said, handing him the sketch, "because you keep us safe." Ethan's throat tightened as he accepted the drawing. "Thank you, Lily. This means more to me than you know." Rachel watched the exchange, her eyes misting with tears. Despite the looming danger, Lily's resilience reminded her of what they were fighting for: a chance at a life filled with love and safety. As the days passed, Jack's investigation revealed that Trevor had connections to a local journalist known for sensational exposés. It became clear that Trevor was planning to use the media to tarnish Rachel's reputation, framing her as a manipulative con artist who had taken advantage of Ethan's kindness. Christopher, leveraging his own connections, worked to counteract Trevor's smear campaign. He reached out to trusted journalists, sharing Lily's story and the positive changes Rachel had brought to the estate. Meanwhile, Ethan prepared for the inevitable confrontation. He strengthened security around the mansion, ensuring that every gate, window, and door was monitored. But he knew that physical barriers wouldn't be enough to protect what mattered most. One evening, as the household gathered for dinner, the sound of shattering glass pierced the air. Everyone froze, their eyes darting toward the source of the noise. Jack burst into the room, his face pale. "We've got an intruder," he said urgently. Ethan's heart pounded as he rose from his chair. "Get Rachel and Lily to safety, now." Christopher stood, his expression fierce. "I'm not letting you face this alone." Ethan nodded, a rare moment of understanding passing between father and son. Together, they moved toward the source of the commotion, determined to protect their family at all costs. The mansion was eerily quiet after the shattered glass incident. Security lights illuminated the grounds, casting long shadows across the gardens. Inside, every occupant was on edge. Lily clung to Rachel, sensing her mother's unease, while Christopher and Ethan worked with Jack to assess the security footage. "The intruder didn't get far," Jack said, replaying the grainy video feed. A hooded figure was seen near the garage apartment before vanishing into the shadows. "Whoever it was, they know the property well." Ethan clenched his fists. "Trevor's playing games, trying to intimidate us." Rachel's voice shook as she spoke. "He's not going to stop, is he?" Christopher placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Not unless we stop him first." Ethan gathered everyone in the study, the room heavy with tension. The group included Rachel, Lily, Christopher, Margaret, and Grace. Jack stood by the door, his stance protective. "We need to force Trevor to make a mistake," Ethan said. "If we wait, he'll escalate, and I won't risk anyone's safety." Christopher nodded. "Agreed, but we need to be smart. He's dangerous, and manipulative. Jack cleared his throat. I've got a lead. Trevor's been using a local journalist, Richard Grayson, to dig up dirt on Rachel. If we can intercept their communication, we might be able to expose Trevor's plans before he strikes again. Rachel's hands tightened into fists. He's trying to destroy everything I've worked so hard to rebuild. Ethan's voice softened. And we won't let him. But we have to stay united. The next day, Jack and Christopher worked together to set a trap for Trevor. Using the journalist as bait, they sent a fabricated message implying that Rachel would be attending a public charity event in the city, a calculated risk to lure Trevor out of hiding. Meanwhile, Ethan fortified the mansion's defenses and ensured Rachel and Lily remained protected. He also enlisted Margaret's help in gathering evidence of Trevor's past crimes, from financial fraud to intimidation tactics. Rachel struggled with the plan, torn between fear for Lily's safety and her growing resolve to face Trevor head-on. I don't want Lily to live in fear, she confided to Ethan one evening. But the thought of confronting Trevor terrifies me. Ethan placed a comforting hand on hers. You're stronger than you think, Rachel. And you're not alone. The night of the charity event arrived, and the mansion was unusually quiet. Rachel and Lily stayed hidden in a secure room, while Christopher and Ethan prepared for the confrontation. Jack monitored the security feeds, waiting for Trevor to take the bait. As expected, Trevor arrived at the event's supposed location, but when he realized it was a setup, his rage boiled over. He returned to the mansion under cover of darkness, determined to exact revenge. The confrontation began, with Trevor breaking into the garage apartment, his presence triggering the silent alarms. Ethan and Christopher intercepted him, their voices echoing through the otherwise still night. Trevor, it's over, Ethan said, his tone calm but firm. Leave now, and we won't press charges. Trevor sneered, his eyes filled with malice. You think you can scare me? I'll take what's mine. Christopher stepped forward, his stance protective. You've already lost. The police are on their way, and we have enough evidence to bury you. Trevor lunged at Christopher, his rage turning physical. The two men grappled in the dimly lit garage, their movements frantic. Ethan grabbed a nearby tool, using it to separate them. Enough! Ethan shouted, his voice carrying the authority he rarely displayed. You won't hurt anyone here. Trevor backed away, his breathing heavy. This isn't over. At that moment, the sound of sirens filled the air, and red and blue lights illuminated the estate. Jack had called the police, and officers swarmed the property, apprehending Trevor before he could escape. Rachel and Lily emerged from their hiding place, their relief palpable. Lily ran to Ethan, clutching his leg, as tears streamed down her face. You saved us, she whispered. As Trevor was led away in handcuffs, Rachel broke down, her emotions finally catching up with her. Ethan pulled her into a protective embrace, his own relief evident. It's over, he murmured. You're safe now. Christopher stood nearby, his expression a mix of exhaustion and pride. You handled that better than I expected, Dad. Ethan smiled faintly. I had good motivation. Margaret and Grace joined them, offering words of comfort and support. The household felt closer than ever, united by their shared ordeal. In the days following Trevor's arrest, Rachel faced a decision. Margaret had secured a meeting with a prominent gallery owner who was interested in showcasing her artwork. But Rachel hesitated, uncertain if she was ready to step back into the public eye. Ethan encouraged her, his voice filled with conviction. Your talent deserves to be seen, Rachel. And you've earned this chance, Lily chimed in, her youthful optimism shining through. You can do it, Mom. I believe in you. Rachel smiled through her tears, finally feeling the weight of her past lifting. "All right," she said. "Let's do it." That evening, the household gathered for a celebratory dinner. The atmosphere was warm and lively, a stark contrast to the tension of the previous weeks. Lily presented Ethan with a new drawing, a vibrant depiction of the mansion filled with light and color. "This is how it feels now," Lily said. "Happy?" Ethan's eyes misted as he accepted the drawing. "Thank you, Lily. It's perfect." Christopher raised his glass, his tone sincere. "To family, whatever shape it takes." Everyone echoed the sentiment, their voices filled with gratitude and hope. As the night wore on, Ethan found himself alone on the veranda, staring at the stars. Rachel joined him, her presence comforting. "You've given us more than I ever thought possible," she said softly. "I don't know how to thank you." Ethan shook his head. "You've given me something too, a reason to believe in second chances." Rachel smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. "Here's to new beginnings." Ethan raised an imaginary glass, his heart full. "To new beginnings." As the stars twinkled above, the mansion stood as a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest times, love and resilience could light the way forward. The morning after Trevor's arrest, the mansion seemed lighter, as if the weight of his looming threat had finally lifted. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, and the hum of activity in the kitchen and garden carried a newfound energy. Ethan stood on the veranda, sipping his coffee, as he watched Lily chase the family dog through the garden. Her laughter echoed across the estate, a sound he hadn't realized he needed so deeply. Rachel emerged from the kitchen with a mug of tea, her steps cautious, but her face more at ease. "It feels strange," she admitted, taking a seat beside him. "Not looking over my shoulder for the first time in years." Ethan smiled gently. "It's time to focus on what's ahead, Rachel. You deserve that much." Margaret arrived mid-morning, carrying a large portfolio of Rachel's sketches and paintings. She placed them carefully on the dining room table, where Rachel, Ethan, and Christopher had gathered. "The gallery owner, Mr. Henry Walters, was impressed with your work," Margaret began, her tone warm but professional. "He wants to feature a solo exhibition in 2 months." Rachel's eyes widened. 2 months? That's not enough time to prepare, Margaret chuckled. "It's plenty of time if you focus, and I'll help with the logistics." Christopher leaned forward. "You've got this, Rachel. And if you need more hands, I'm in." Ethan nodded. "You've already shown how talented you are. Now, it's time to show the world." Rachel hesitated, the weight of her past threatening to overshadow her excitement. But Lily, seated quietly nearby, spoke up. "Mom, I think you should do it. Your paintings make people happy." Rachel smiled, her eyes misting. "All right," she said softly. "Let's do this." The garage apartment, once a refuge for Rachel and Lily, now became a hive of creativity. Margaret helped organize Rachel's workspace, while Ethan and Christopher assisted with framing and transport. Rachel threw herself into her work, her confidence growing with each brushstroke. She painted vivid landscapes inspired by the estate, poignant portraits that captured emotions, and abstract pieces that reflected her journey. Lily often sat nearby, sketching her own creations. She showed her drawings to Ethan, who praised her talent and encouraged her budding artistic passion. One afternoon, Lily presented Rachel with a drawing of the two of them, surrounded by a colorful garden. "This is us," she said proudly, "happy and safe." Rachel hugged her tightly. "It's perfect, Lily. Just like you." While Rachel focused on her art, Ethan and Christopher worked to mend their strained relationship. They spent afternoons walking through the estate, reminiscing about old times and confronting the misunderstandings that had driven them apart. "I always thought you were more focused on your business than our family," Christopher admitted during one such walk. "But I see now how much you've changed." Ethan sighed. "I made mistakes, Chris, but having you back here, it means more to me than you know." Christopher nodded, his expression softening. "I'm glad I came back. It feels like home again." The mansion's transformation wasn't limited to those living within it. Ethan reached out to the local community, hosting small gatherings and charity events to rebuild relationships that had frayed over the years. At one such event, neighbors who had once criticized Ethan's decision to take in Rachel and Lily approached him with gratitude. "Your kindness inspired us," one woman said. "It reminded us of the importance of looking out for each other." Rachel, initially hesitant to attend these events, found herself welcomed with open arms. She shared her story with honesty and vulnerability, earning the respect and admiration of those who had doubted her. Meanwhile, Lily thrived in the supportive environment of the estate. She began attending a local art class, where her talent quickly caught the attention of her teacher. At the end of the term, Lily won an award for her work, bringing tears to Rachel's eyes. "She's blossoming," Ethan remarked to Rachel one evening. "Just like her mother." Rachel smiled. "She's my reason for everything. I'm so proud of her." As the day of the exhibition approached, Rachel's nerves returned. She worried about how her work would be received and whether her past would overshadow her present. Ethan, sensing her anxiety, offered her quiet reassurance. "Your story is one of strength and resilience. That's what people will see when they look at your work." The exhibition was held in a prestigious downtown gallery. The room buzzed with anticipation as guests arrived, their eyes drawn to the vibrant paintings that adorned the walls. Rachel stood near the entrance, clutching Lily's hand as she watched the crowd. Margaret approached with a glass of champagne. "Take a deep breath, Rachel. This is your moment." The night was a triumph. Critics praised Rachel's unique perspective and emotional depth, while collectors eagerly purchased her pieces. Rachel found herself surrounded by well-wishers, their words of encouragement filling her with pride. Lily beamed as she introduced herself to the guests. "My mom is the best artist ever," she declared, drawing laughter and applause. Ethan and Christopher stood nearby, watching with quiet satisfaction. "She's come so far," Christopher said. Ethan nodded. "We all have." Toward the end of the evening, Mr. Walters approached Rachel with a proposition. "Your work has made quite an impression," he said. "I'd like to feature you in a traveling exhibition next year." Rachel's breath caught. "That's incredible. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Ethan interjected with a smile. "This is just the beginning." Rachel glanced at Lily, who nodded enthusiastically. "Yes," she said firmly. "I'd be honored." As the exhibition wound down, the household gathered in the mansion's living room, basking in the glow of their shared victory. Rachel, holding a glass of wine, raised it in a toast. "To family," she said, her voice steady. "The one we're born with, and the one we choose." Ethan, Christopher, Margaret, and Lily echoed the sentiment, their voices blending in harmony. That night, as Rachel stood on the veranda with Ethan, she gazed at the stars and reflected on how far they had all come. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Ethan smiled. "The best is yet to come, Rachel." The future was bright, and for the first time in years, Rachel and Lily felt truly free. Together with Ethan and their newfound family, they looked forward to the next chapter of their lives, one filled with love, hope, and endless possibilities. The mansion was abuzz with activity in the weeks following Rachel's successful exhibition. Rachel's confidence soared, as she received glowing reviews in local and national art magazines. Lily proudly displayed a newspaper clipping featuring her mother, pointing it out to anyone who visited. Ethan, energized by the transformation within his home, began to focus on creating a broader impact. "We've proven that second chances can change lives," he said to Rachel one afternoon. "Let's make sure more people get that opportunity." Rachel hesitated. "You've already done so much, Ethan. I wouldn't want to overstep." Ethan smiled warmly. "This isn't just about us, Rachel. It's about showing the world that kindness matters." Rachel was approached by local organizations seeking her guidance on supporting women recovering from domestic abuse. Thus initially unsure, she accepted, recognizing the opportunity to turn her pain into a source of strength for others. One groupie invited her to speak at a community event. Nervously, Rachel prepared her speech, with Ethan's and Margaret's encouragement. On the day of the event, she stood before a room full of women, her voice trembling at first, but growing stronger with each word. "I'm here because someone believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself," Rachel said, glancing at Ethan in the audience. "We can't undo the past, but we can build a future where no one feels they have to face their struggles alone." The applause that followed was thunderous, and Rachel left the stage with tears in her eyes. The exhibition's success and Rachel's advocacy drew media attention to Ethan's mansion and its unique occupants. Journalists requested interviews, fascinated by the story of a millionaire opening his home to a struggling family. Ethan, Rachel, and Lily sat down for an interview with a local TV station. The reporter, a young and empathetic woman named Clara, skillfully guided the conversation. "What inspired you to take such a bold step, Mr. Westfield?" Clara asked. Ethan's gaze softened as he replied, "I spent years focused on material success, but it brought me no joy." Rachel and Lily reminded me of the power of human connection. It wasn't about charity. It was about finding meaning. Rachel added, "Ethan gave us a chance when we had nothing left. Now, I want to pay that forward." The segment aired to widespread acclaim, inspiring viewers across the city to reach out and help those in need. Lily's bond with Ethan deepened as she flourished under his mentorship. Together, they planted a garden on the estate, filling it with vibrant flowers and fresh vegetables. "This will be our legacy," Lily declared one sunny afternoon. "A place that grows love." Meanwhile, Christopher continued to repair his relationship with Ethan. Their shared efforts in supporting Rachel's artistic endeavors brought them closer, and they began discussing long-term plans for the family. "Have you thought about moving back permanently?" Ethan asked one evening. Christopher hesitated, but eventually nodded. "I think I'd like that. It feels like home again." Despite their successes, challenges arose. Rachel struggled with imposter syndrome as she prepared for the traveling exhibition. The pressure of maintaining her momentum weighed heavily on her. "I'm scared of failing," she admitted to Margaret during a late-night phone call. Margaret's voice was firm but kind. "You've already succeeded, Rachel. This isn't about proving yourself, it's about sharing your story." Meanwhile, Ethan faced criticism from former associates who questioned his decision to focus on philanthropy. "You've gone soft," one business partner sneered during a chance encounter. Ethan's response was calm but resolute. "If helping people is soft, then I'll wear that label proudly." Inspired by Rachel's story, several local businesses began offering job training and support programs for women in need. Ethan's estate became a hub for these initiatives, hosting workshops and networking events. At one such event, a young woman named Hannah approached Rachel with tears in her eyes. "Your story gave me the courage to leave an abusive relationship," she said. Thank you. Rachel hugged her tightly, moved by the impact of her journey. You're stronger than you think, Hannah. Keep believing in yourself. Amidst the whirlwind of change, Lily prepared for her school's annual art showcase. She worked tirelessly on a painting titled Our Safe Haven, depicting the mansion as a beacon of light surrounded by stormy skies. The night of the showcase, Rachel, Ethan, and Christopher sat in the audience, beaming with pride as Lily's painting was unveiled. The crowd erupted in applause, and Lily's teacher announced that her piece would be featured in a citywide youth art exhibition. You did it, sweetheart, Rachel whispered, hugging her daughter tightly. I'm so proud of you. Ethan proposed a bold idea during a family dinner. What if we expanded the garage into a full-fledged community center, he suggested. A place where people can find support, resources, and a fresh start. Rachel's eyes lit up. That's incredible, Ethan. It could change so many lives. Christopher offered his expertise in project management, and Margaret volunteered to curate art programs for the center. Together, they began planning the initiative, determined to make Ethan's vision a reality. As the family gathered on the veranda one evening, watching the sunset over the garden, Ethan reflected on how far they had come. This started as an attempt to fill a void, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But it's become so much more. Rachel placed a hand on his arm. You gave us hope, Ethan. And now, we're sharing that hope with others. Lily ran up to them, holding a small bouquet of flowers from the garden. For you, Grandpa, she said, her smile radiant. Ethan accepted the bouquet, his heart full. Thank you, Lily. This is the best gift I could ever receive. As the stars appeared in the night sky, the mansion stood as a testament to resilience, redemption, and the power of community. The ripples of change they had created would continue to spread, touching countless lives and ensuring that their legacy endured. Snow blanketed the Westfield estate, the white landscape glowing under the soft light of holiday decorations. Ethan's mansion, usually imposing, now radiated warmth, with strings of lights adorning its grand facade and a towering Christmas tree visible through the front window. Rachel stood by the kitchen counter, rolling out dough for cookies with Lily, whose face was smudged with flour. Laughter filled the room as Ethan entered, carrying a box of ornaments. I hope you saved some cookies for me, he teased. Only if you help decorate the tree, Lily replied, grinning mischievously. Later that evening, as the family gathered in the living room, Ethan revealed a letter he'd received. I've invited someone special to join us for Christmas, he said, his eyes twinkling. Rachel looked up, curious. Who? Christopher's wife, Amelia, Ethan replied, and their daughter, Sophie. Christopher, seated nearby, froze. Dad, I haven't spoken to Amelia in over a year. I know, Ethan said gently. But it's Christmas, Chris. If there's ever a time to heal, it's now. Christopher hesitated, but eventually nodded. All right. Let's see how it goes. The days leading up to Christmas were a flurry of activity. Rachel and Margaret worked together to prepare a holiday feast, while Ethan took Lily shopping for gifts. At the same time, the community center project gained momentum. Volunteers helped clear out the garage, transforming it into a welcoming space with cozy furniture, a library corner, and an art studio. Rachel, inspired by the progress, painted a mural on one of the walls, a vibrant depiction of a tree with branches extending outward, each leaf representing hope and renewal. On Christmas Eve, Amelia and Sophie arrive. Sophie, a bright-eyed 10-year-old, immediately bonded with Lily, the two girls running off to play in the snow. Amelia, however, was reserved. She exchanged polite pleasantries with Christopher, but avoided deeper conversations. Ethan, sensing the tension, pulled her aside. "Thank you for coming," he said. "It means a lot to all of us." Amelia smiled faintly. "I wasn't sure if I should, but Sophie deserves to spend Christmas with her family." The Christmas Eve dinner brought both joy and unease. The table was laden with food, and laughter rang out as Ethan told stories from his youth. However, the strained relationship between Christopher and Amelia was palpable. At one point, Christopher attempted to address the elephant in the room. "Amelia, I know I made mistakes, but I want to make things right." Amelia hesitated, her gaze fixed on her plate. "Chris, it's not that simple. There's a lot we need to talk about." Ethan intervened, his tone gentle. "Why not start with tonight? Let's focus on what we're grateful for." The mood lightened as the family shared what they cherished most. When it was Lily's turn, she beamed. "I'm grateful for my mom, for Grandpa Ethan, and for our new family." Her words brought tears to Rachel's eyes, and even Amelia smiled. The next morning, the family gathered around the tree to exchange gifts. Lily tore into her presents with excitement, while Rachel watched with quiet joy. Ethan handed Rachel a small box. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet, engraved with the words, "Second chances shine bright." Rachel's voice trembled as she thanked him. "You've given us so much more than a second chance, Ethan." Later, Christopher surprised Amelia with a heartfelt letter. "I know words can't fix everything," he said, "but I want you to know how much I regret letting us fall apart." Amelia read the letter in silence, her eyes glistening. "Chris, this is a start," she said softly. As the day unfolded, Ethan and Rachel found a quiet moment on the veranda, watching the snow fall. "This feels perfect," Rachel said. "I never thought I'd have a Christmas like this again." Ethan smiled. "Neither did I. It's funny how life has a way of surprising us." Rachel glanced at him. "Do you think things will work out for Christopher and Amelia?" Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "If they're willing to try, anything's possible. Look at us." That evening, the family hosted a Christmas dinner at the newly transformed community center. Neighbors, friends, and volunteers filled the space, sharing laughter and stories. Rachel unveiled the mural, and Margaret spoke about the center's mission. "This place isn't just a building," she said. "It's a symbol of what we can achieve when we come together." The highlight of the night was a surprise performance by Lily and Sophie, who sang a Christmas carol together. Their sweet voices brought the room to a standstill, and the crowd erupted in applause. As the evening wound down, Christopher and Amelia stepped outside for a private conversation. Under the glow of the center's twinkling lights, they spoke honestly about their past and their hopes for the future. "I miss us," Christopher admitted. "I miss being a family." Amelia took his hand. "I miss it too. But we need to rebuild trust, Chris." "I'm ready," he said. "Whatever it takes." They embraced, a small but significant step toward reconciliation. Back at the mansion, Ethan stood by the fireplace, watching as the family exchanged goodnight hugs. Rachel approached, her expression soft. "This was the best Christmas I've ever had," she said. Ethan smiled. "It's the people who make it special." As Rachel turned to leave, Ethan called out, "Rachel, wait." She looked back, curious. Ethan hesitated before saying, "I'm grateful for you, for Lily, for everything you've brought into my life." Rachel's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "We're grateful for you too, Ethan. You've given us a home, in every sense of the word." As the clock struck midnight, the mansion fell quiet, the warmth of the day lingering in every corner. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in peace and possibility. The first rays of January sunlight broke through the frosted windows of the mansion, casting a warm glow over the bustling household. For the first time in years, Ethan woke up with a sense of purpose and joy, knowing his home was filled with love and laughter. Rachel was already in the kitchen with Grace, preparing breakfast. Lily and Sophie ran through the halls, their giggles echoing like music. Christopher and Amelia sat in the study, discussing plans for the future. Ethan joined the group in the dining room, his smile reflecting the harmony in the air. "A new year, a new chapter," he said, lifting his coffee mug. "Let's make it one to remember." As January progressed, Rachel's art continued to gain attention. The traveling exhibition Ethan had helped organize opened in Los Angeles, attracting art critics and collectors alike. One particular painting, titled Resilience, became the centerpiece of the collection, depicting a phoenix rising from ashes, a metaphor for Rachel's journey. Rachel traveled to the exhibition's opening with Margaret and Christopher by her side. Standing before a crowd of admirers, she delivered a heartfelt speech. "This is not just my story," she said. "It's a testament to the power of second chances and the people who give them." Her words resonated deeply, earning a standing ovation. Back at the mansion, the community center was nearing completion. Ethan, Christopher, and a team of volunteers worked tirelessly to finalize the details. The center was christened the Westfield Haven, a name that symbolized refuge and opportunity. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Ethan stood before a large crowd, flanked by Rachel and Lily. His voice was steady as he spoke. "This center is proof that when we come together, we can create something extraordinary. It's not about charity, it's about community." The crowd erupted into applause as Ethan cut the ribbon, officially opening the center. Children rushed inside to explore the new play areas, while adults marveled at the art studio and job training facilities. One afternoon, Rachel received a letter addressed to Lily. It was from the director of a prestigious art school in New York, inviting Lily to apply for a scholarship based on her work in the community art program. Rachel hesitated, torn between pride and the fear of being separated from her daughter. She discussed the opportunity with Ethan, who offered his unwavering support. "Lily deserves every chance to shine," he said, "and so do you." After much thought, Rachel decided to let Lily apply. "Whatever happens," she told her daughter, "I'll always be your biggest fan." Christopher and Amelia spent weeks rebuilding their relationship. Through honest conversations and shared experiences, they rediscovered the bond that had once brought them together. One evening, as snow fell gently outside, Christopher knelt before Amelia with a small velvet box. "Amelia, I've made so many mistakes, but one thing has never changed. I love you. Will you give me the chance to make things right?" Amelia's tears sparkled in the firelight as she nodded. "Yes, Chris. Let's start over." Their renewed commitment brought joy to the entire family, and plans for a spring wedding quickly took shape. On a quiet evening, Ethan found himself alone in his study, flipping through a scrapbook Rachel had created. The pages were filled with photographs of the past year, Lily's art contests, the mansion's holiday decorations, the community center's progress. Ethan paused on a photo of himself and Lily planting the garden. The memory brought a smile to his face, but it also stirred a sense of longing. Pulling out a fresh sheet of paper, Ethan began writing a letter to Eleanor, his late wife. "I wish you could see what this house has become," he wrote. "It's no longer a monument to wealth, but a sanctuary for love and growth." In early spring, Rachel's art was featured at a gala benefiting women's shelters. The event was held at a grand venue in New York, with Ethan and Lily attending as her guests of honor. Rachel's work sold for record-breaking amounts, with all proceeds donated to the cause. Her final painting of the night, The Haven, depicted the community center as a glowing beacon of hope. Ethan took the stage to introduce Rachel. This woman has not only transformed her own life, but has also inspired countless others to do the same. Rachel Myers, you are a testament to the power of resilience. Tears streamed down Rachel's face as she accepted the honor. With spring in full bloom, the mansion was alive with activity. Lily received news of her acceptance into the art school, sparking a mix of celebration and bittersweet goodbyes. "I'm going to make you proud, Mom," Lily said, hugging Rachel tightly. Rachel continued to advocate for women's empowerment, working closely with Ethan and the community center team. Together, they launched a scholarship fund for single mothers pursuing careers in the arts. Ethan, meanwhile, embraced his role as a mentor and father figure. His relationship with Christopher grew stronger, and he found new purpose in guiding others toward meaningful lives. On a warm spring evening, the family gathered in the garden for a picnic to celebrate Lily's upcoming departure and Christopher and Amelia's engagement. The atmosphere was filled with laughter, love, and hope. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan raised a glass. "To family," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "The one we're born with, and the one we choose." Rachel smiled at him, her heart full. "And to second chances." Later that night, Ethan stood on the veranda, gazing at the stars. Rachel joined him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "Do you ever wonder what's next?" she asked softly. Ethan chuckled. "I've learned to stop wondering and just embrace whatever comes." Rachel nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "You've changed my life, Ethan, and Lily's." "And you've changed mine," Ethan replied, "in ways I never thought possible." As they stood together under the starlit sky, the world felt full of promise. The mansion, once a symbol of isolation, now radiated warmth and belonging. A testament to the power of love, resilience, and the unwavering belief in brighter tomorrows. As the sun sets on this incredible journey of second chances, resilience, and newfound family, we're reminded that it's never too late to rewrite our story. What part of Ethan, Rachel, or Lily's journey resonated most with you? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your take on their transformation. And if this story touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and join us for more inspiring tales that remind us of the power of love, hope, and the human spirit. Don't forget to turn on notifications, because the next story we're sharing is one you won't want to miss. Together, let's keep celebrating the stories that connect us all. See you in the next chapter.